I don't see how that practically or logically should be done or could be done. But
Really, before I start the meeting, somebody's got a mic on, please, before I start the meeting. Could they turn that off, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, members, and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee for Leader, Finance and Performance, which is going out of our remote video link on Wednesday, the 12th of January, 2022 at 1800 hours. And I'd like to wish you all a very happy new year, and I hope you've all been well. Go to the agenda, item 1, roll call and virtual meetings explanation. Well, we're joined by members of the officers team of Democratic Services, Legal Services and the management team. I shall now conduct a roll call. If you just say present, that would be great. Councillor Alison Bennett.
Present.
Councillor Heidi Brunson.
Present.
I don't know if Councillor Coote's in yet. Councillor Coote? Okay. Councillor Rachel Cromie.
Present.
Councillor Anne Eves.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Janice Henwood.
Present.
Councillor Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Jackson.
Present.
Councillor Knight, I think I'm here. Councillor Lee.
Present.
Vice Chairman, Councillor Pulfer.
Present.
Councillor Lynn Stockwell.
Present.
Councillor Trumbull.
Present.
And Councillor Whitaker.
Present.
Thank you very much. If you could advise me if Councillor Coote does get into me, that would be great. Thank you. Legal Officer Tom will give you a meeting explanation. I think you all know it by now, but over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We're meeting virtually because of the high level of COVID rates at the moment. We are able to meet virtually with this meeting because it's an advisory meeting and not a decision-making meeting. You'll provide advice to the Cabinet, and then, of course, members will be looking at the budget at the beginning of March. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Item 2, to note substitutes in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 4. I have none. Item 3, to receive apologies for absence. I have none. To receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda, if you'd raise your hand to indicate if you do. I don't see any indications. Thank you. Item 5, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 10th of December 2021, and if you could use your yes, no buttons to confirm or not confirm those minutes. Thank you. Under reactions, if you don't remember. Okay, that's unanimous with the members present. Thank you very much. Item 6, to consider any items that the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. Item 7, the substantive item for tonight, the draft corporate plan and budget 2023. It's split into 3 sections. We've got our summary budgets, then we've got the individual business units, and then we've got the capital work programme. I'm going to invite the Chief Executive, first of all, to give us an introduction, followed by the Leader of the Council, Councillor Jonathan Ash-Edwards. Catherine, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and all members. Just a few words of introduction from me, just to try to, as I always do at this time of the year, to contextualise the papers that you're considering tonight. I'll offer a few comments or perspectives on them. I think they fall broadly under 2 headings, really. The first are around the pandemic, and the second is around service delivery. With regard to the pandemic, I think my main point is that I feel there's a risk of us all, as we enter the 3rd year of this global crisis, that we in some way slightly mainstream the pandemic and possibly overlook the continuing impact that it's having on our council and its staff. And so my plea is that we should try to avoid doing that, that we do need to remember that the pandemic is having a big impact, still having a big impact on what we're trying to do as a council, on our finances, which is evident from the papers in front of you, but also from the demand on our services. So we're not operating in an environment like we were in, say, 2018. It continues to be quite a difficult environment to operate in effectively. And I think I would encourage us all to just keep that in our minds, that we are setting a budget and a set of service plans in a context that continues to be fairly hostile and difficult. So let's keep that in our minds. In particular, services, I've touched on that. We're continuing to see very high volumes of service need around housing. Revs and Bens, we've got a key role in dispensing grants to governments and supporting governments and to businesses, and also to businesses, to support businesses. Our environmental health team in particular is doing a lot of that, as is the planning team. So service levels aren't normal, still not normal. And you can also see at high level the impact the pandemic's having on our finances, which is that as a largely financially independent council, therefore reliant on what we can earn to pay for our services, our income has been profoundly affected by the pandemic, like all local authorities in the country. So we can, as you can see from the papers, we don't have enough income to pay for all the services and the work that we need to do. And so we're using our reserves. And this is the, like last year, we are recommending that you carry on doing that. Now, as I said this time last year, that isn't something we can keep on doing. And our projections in the paper show that. But I think it remains too uncertain in terms of the pandemic to make another choice right now. Now, no doubt, as we get into the debate, we can go into that a little more, and I'll be very happy to respond if members want to pick up more on the financial strategy. But I think the recommendations are, given the continuing uncertainties, that we don't go too much further down the road than we have of either cutting our costs and cutting services, or indeed making other plans that may enable us to bring the budget back into balance, because I think there are still continue to be too many moving parts with regard to the pandemic. And as I said, the pandemic is expecting more of our services. So I don't think we can sensibly cut them at the moment without letting our communities down or risking doing that. So those were my comments around the pandemic. Around service enhancement and delivery, I wanted to, well, first of all, continue to say what a great job I think the staff team and you as members, as all together, we have done as a partnership over the last couple of years since this crisis hit. I think we've seen great teamwork between members and officers, and the officer team continues to work incredibly hard to do the very best it can for communities. And I think if you'd asked me back in 2018, if there was a global pandemic, Catherine, what would you be hoping for? And I think I might have said just to keep my head above water, just to keep going. But in fact, we've done far more than keep going. And in the papers in front of you, you can see quite a lot of examples of where we've not just kept going and not just tread water, but we have been considerably enhancing services and assets for our communities. And we plan to continue doing that in the 22-23 year, or at least that's what these draft service plans tell us. And I think it is important that we remember that we're not just holding fast, we're doing far more than that. And if I was to pick a couple of things out of the plans that you're scrutinising tonight, I think the first thing I would pick to emphasise for you is our continued planned investment in fibre infrastructure. This is a £10 million investment in our district, £10 million programme, and we have already laid over 70 kilometres of full fibre, sorry. And we've got about another 30 to do, probably before April. And what's the potential of that? Is it all about Netflix? Well, no, not really. Actually, it's not at all about that. It's about business. And data from other places in the world that have this kind of infrastructure show that the productivity gain for an economy like ours could be well over £150 million a year. 1,500 new jobs. These are step changes. And so investing in that level of core infrastructure, which will give us one of the best fibre infrastructures in the country, is a huge achievement. And we are well on our way to doing that, as I say, a £10 million investment. I think the second thing I might pull out from our plans for next year would be the continuing enhancement to our community assets. So there are a number of, as you can see, proposals around improving much used and loved playgrounds and parks, including 2 proposals in the capital programme in front of you, which amount to about £1 million of investment in parks. These are not small projects. And also I draw your attention, it's mentioned briefly, that next year we'll see our first serious work around the development for the Centre for Outdoor Sport in Burgess Hill, which will sit close to the Triangle and be a regionally, we hope, significant sporting asset for our district. Total value of the asset will be over £6 million, and we'll start planning that in earnest in the 22-23 years. So I think in terms of what we're contributing and supporting our growing population and community, I think there are a lot of good news stories in this plan. But to finish where I started, I think the pandemic continues to be our biggest challenge, probably. And so, as I said at the start, I would encourage us not to overlook the impact of that's having every day on your life and your work as councillors and that of the staff. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine, for that very informative summary there. Thank you. Councillor Johnson-Edwards, do you wish to come in?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm grateful for the chance to just make some comments ahead of your consideration of the budget and corporate plan this evening. And as ever, my cabinet colleagues and I welcome this meeting and listen very carefully to this meeting as the budget goes on its way through the process. I just want to pick up on a couple of the points that the Chief Executive has made and add some comments of my own, if that's okay, Chairman. Members know the impact that COVID has had on the council. I'm not going to rehearse that in any more detail. It has imposed a phenomenal amount of work, disruption and financial cost on the plans that we all set out. And that's been important in many respects because it has meant us working to support our communities and our businesses through really difficult times, and I think we've done that well. But what's really important is to understand that has come at a cost, and this budget sets that out again in terms of the ongoing cost and the work that we need to continue to do to get back to a balanced budget and an even keel in terms of our finances. But we need to make the right choices in doing so. And we have, as a council, agreed that the best course of action is to sustain our services, to underwrite our leisure centres and so on through using appropriate levels of reserves, recognising that you use your reserves in tough times to get you through so that you can then rebuild. And it's that rebuilding that we need to have our eyes on, because the alternative to that approach is that we just stop doing things. We cut things, we save the money that way. And I think that would be the wrong approach. We need to really focus on how we support our communities and our district with a really clear vision for our residents, for our environment, for our communities, for our businesses. And I think that is reflected in this plan for the year ahead. And I just want to highlight a few aspects where that is the case. On infrastructure, we are seeing the biggest rollout of infrastructure in our district in a generation. The Chief Executive's talked about the full fibre project. Over 100 kilometres of full fibre now installed through the district, with much more to come over the next year. That ultimately leads to more businesses investing here, more people choosing to locate here, high quality jobs, well-paying, good quality jobs for our communities. We're already seeing it happening. We're already seeing doors opening because people know we're making those investments in the future. We're seeing really good progress in the rollout of the Burgess Hill Growth Programme. Infrastructure, economy, new businesses, new jobs, that will continue. And there are some really exciting projects, I think, coming forward over the next year to continue that, because I think sometimes when we talk about infrastructure, people hear the roads and all of those kind of things, but actually it's communities that matter as well. And so beginning the work to master plan our new Centre for Outdoor Sports. Again, the single biggest upgrade in our sporting facilities for a generation, to be underway this year. Our food waste trial. We've talked a lot about the environment and what we're doing to support our environment, to tackle climate change. As a district council, the single biggest thing we can do is reduce the impact that our rubbish has on the environment. It's the single biggest lever in our control. And so our food waste trial getting underway this year takes us an important step forward in introducing this service to our district. And more broadly on community facilities, Chairman, I want to just highlight some of the projects set out for the next year in the plan. Members will know from the Cabinet decision last month the next steps in terms of the Clare Hall site, supporting the public consultation that showed a clear appetite for change and modernisation and investment, and we will deliver that. New playgrounds in Haywards Heath, East Grinstead, Turners Hill, set out in the corporate plan that you can support and give the go-ahead over the next year, investing in our communities. And two really flagship important projects. Members will have heard Councillor Belsey reporting about the Parks Master Plan work, and we're seeing coming forward today the first two of those at Hemsley's in Pease Pottage and Mount Noddy in East Grinstead, a £1.6 million investment in our parks and open spaces. And we've seen through the pandemic how important our parks are to our communities, and it's right that we ensure that they are the best that they can be, and more to follow on the Parks Master Plans after those two projects. So I think taken together, Chairman, what this budget and corporate plan does is it brings together a sensible financial position that ensures we're investing in the things that our residents want to see happen, while protecting the financial position of this council as much as possible, recognising that ultimately you cannot spend money that you don't have, and invests in crucial projects for our economy, for sports, for leisure, for community. And I think we should be very proud of that work. I think it is something that we've all worked collectively very hard on over some time, all beginning to come to fruition and make big strides ahead over the next year. Hopefully, Chairman, that gives you a sort of strategic overview of the budget. Obviously, very keen to listen to the debate, happy to respond to any questions members might have, and look forward to your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. That's very informative. Thank you very much indeed. We're on the summary section, the first section. It goes through to page 15, but I think there are some important points there, in particular on keeping members focused on the council's priorities, which is our effective and responsive services, substantial economic growth, sustainable economic growth, strong and resilient communities, and financial independence. So on page 2 and 3 particularly, there's some important ones. They're very important: the council tax rise, income from fees, and that. So do I have any questions relating to pages 2 and 3, please? Councillor Anne Eves.
Thank you, Chair. There's no mention of climate change on page 2, paras 2.2 to 2.5. And as we know, we've got this Sustainable Economy Action Plan coming through in March. That will be finalised then. So how will that be included in the budget? am I right in thinking that it's the £78,000 mentioned on page 28? Thank you.
Catherine, would you like to say that, please?
I'll try to do that for you, Chairman, yes. Page 28, did you say?
Sorry, 28. I thought you said page 2.
She replied,
Yes, I did. I started on page 2, but I said, where's the money? And is it that point on page 28?
Yeah, you've jumped, you did, sorry, Councillor Eames, I did say that we will do the summary section first and then we will go to individual service plans. I think you've jumped quite a bit ahead.
Okay. Could I then just ask, Chairman, where's the money going to come from for the SES?
yeah. I'm happy to take that, Chairman, if that will help.
I think let's take that at
Okay.
the appropriate point. I think that's probably best. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank the officers for producing such a detailed draft corporate plan and budget. My particular question refers to the interesting costs is based on last year's inflation of 3.1%. As we know, inflation is increasing larger than that at the moment. That's obviously going to have an effect on sort of the way things are going to be costing. And any thoughts about what sort of effects that's going to have with future high inflation rates?
Mr. Stewart, are you there? Sounds like one for you.
I am, Chairman, yes, and of course that is one of the key risks within the budget, that that costs increase by more than we anticipate. You'll see on pages 4 and 5, of course, that there's a breakdown there of individual budget lines costs. So, for example, energy is predicted to increase by 18%. Now, that may seem light to members, but members should be aware that we are part of a massive energy buying consortium called Laser, which operates throughout Kent and Surrey and Sussex. So, you know, they are buying in bulk, and whilst there's still a large increase, it could be much worse, as many consumers are finding. But yes, to take the point, Councillor Jackson, it will be a key risk for the authority, for all of us actually across the sector over the next year or two. We think we've made a reasonable, good estimate of inflation. It will be wrong because it's only an estimate, and I dare say the figures will change one way or another. Let's hope they go down rather than up. But of course, we will monitor this as we go through the year, and that will either lead to a budget underspend or overspend. But again, we'll go through the next process again for 23, 24 as we go through the year. And so we change this inflation calculation each year. But for next year, we think it's okay. But as I say, it is subject to some variation as the year unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Gibson, you've got a very inquiring look on your face. Good evening to you.
Well, I'm working out, good evening, Chairman. I'm just working out exactly what order to go through this, because I've got 3 points that I want to raise on these 2 pages alone.
Okay, let's do those pages, please. Yeah.
Yeah, well, 2 and 3 we're talking about, aren't we? Pages
Yeah, that's
2 and
correct.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first is really to echo Councillor Eaves. When I read that list of council priorities, I just wonder whether or not we're living somewhat in the past. As Councillor Eaves noted, in para 2.5, we don't address the need to really put environment and countering climate change within that list, and I think that is something that might just be looked at. And that also goes back up to the way that we list those points in para 2.4. I also I think in para 3.9 I'd like to see a reference to the fact that our residents who will have this modest rise of £4.95 over the £4.95, sorry, are really those in band D. And certainly from knowledge of my district, the proportion who will receive a higher rise than that is the greater number in the district. But the point that really I just want to really sort of bang on about, if you'll let me, Chairman, It is the new homes bonus. Yes, it's great. In 3.2, para 3.3, it's excellent that it rolls on for another year. But it's only paid on houses which are completed and the completion certificate has been issued. Now, we've seen a large number of those in my ward of Crawley Down, and I calculate that the contribution from Crawley Down has exceeded over 3 million into general reserve. And I have to say that I really am disappointed with the amount of that money which has come back into the ward in terms of this infrastructure. I don't have the 4G pitch that Crawley Down football pitch, Crawley Down Football Club so richly deserve with their 21 teams. We don't have other facilities, and I think that the principle of that money and the way it's spent, I think, is something that this council needs to look at again in terms of those communities which have taken the greater development and the extent that they've got back from this very good grant from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I'll pick your environmental one up when we come to that section in the individual service plans. Peter, Mr. Stewart, are you able to answer the question about the Band D that Councillor Gibson raises, £4.95?
Well, I think part of, I have to say with respect, I think part of Councillor Gibson's question is more of a comment, really. I haven't got the figures here that show the split between Band A and Band H at that parish level, and he'll know better than I. But I think the broader point is that Councillor Gibson, it sounds like he'd like to see more new homes bonus coming back to the places that deliver the housing. That's a very laudable aim. And something that the members should take into account when looking at this budget overall, and indeed spending plans over the next year or two.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Bennett, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to make it a hat trick on really emphasising the need to put the climate agenda at the top of the corporate priorities for this council. I don't particularly want to see it relegated to page 28. I think it's a central thing to what we should be discussing. No question, but a comment that I'd like minuted. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm taking your point. Would you like to comment on that, Councillor Ash Edwards, in terms of priorities, the climate and the council's priorities?
Chairman, I think that, I mean, the most direct point is that the page number doesn't, identify the priority. And I think that what you can see from these papers is a very clear direction of travel in terms of taking meaningful action. And as I said in my introduction, the single biggest thing we can do is reduce the impact of our waste. But the work on the sustainable economy strategy that members are involved in is really important to that as well. And some members who are part of this committee will have been part of that work and the work that is being done as part of that working group in terms of heading towards net zero. And through our policy work as a council, we can make a step change in how we deal with the impact on the climate, and I think we are doing that. I won't apologise, Chair, for wanting us to focus on tangible things that make a difference, because it's very, very easy to grandstand and not focus on things that actually make an environmental difference. And I believe that is what we should be focusing on, and the budget does exactly that and brings forward important pieces of work to improve our environment, reduce the impacts of climate change. And as I said, the sustainable economy strategy will be able to go that into much more detail as we head towards net zero as a council and as a community. But Chairman, I think that is really detailed work. It is an important priority. And I think, seen in the round of the other work, I think it's something that members are working on.
Thank you very much. I see no indications on page 2, so I'm going to move towards page 6, the tax bases, capital programme and the 4-year position. If any members have got a question related to that, Councillor Janice Edward, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. under capital program. So my question is, we talk about Burgess Hill growth. Well, we've had a huge growth in the number of houses. We've had a huge growth in the number of site allocations for more houses. So I would like to know, where are there proposals in this corporate plan to promote the growth of our town centre and our cultural quarter? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Asher, would you like to answer that, please?
Chairman, I think that's been covered at full council recently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'd just like to focus a bit on the COVID situation that the Chief Executive commented on in her introduction. So firstly, the leader mentioned broadband investment. I'd just like to point out that I think that also is something that gives a lot of resilience to businesses and jobs. The number of people working from home is intense, and without that, it really would be awkward. So I think that's a really good thing to have for keeping us all secure. I'd like to ask a bit about the reserve position. As we can see, the reserves are predicted to be used in the upcoming years. And my question is this: is that because we anticipate a continuing impact of COVID? Is it for another reason? Or if the pandemic dissipates, and I hope it will do that soon, would in fact that reserve usage be revised? Thank you.
Mr. Stewart, would you like to comment, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's a mixed, as ever, it's a mixture of things, really. Firstly, yes, I should say, really, firstly, on page, I know it's going back slightly, but it does mention it on page 3 at 3.7, that assuming that the car park charges are approved without further ado and without objection, the position that you'll see in terms of using the reserves will change. If I remember rightly, the car park income projections are to increase by some £350,000 a year through the price increases. And that will obviously reduce the bottom line use of the reserves over the 4 years. And the intention, as I think the council report said, was that the charges should be reviewed rather more frequently than they have been of late. I think the last time was 10 years ago, which effectively means they've been going backwards every year for the last 9 years. Not a financially sustainable position. So the bottom line use of reserves will change. That said, there is still a need to draw on reserves, even with that £350,000 added in. A combination of factors, and one is COVID, and one is, that actually income levels are still down, including both leisure in the next year, and in the years after that, we've put in that we're going back to the full leisure income. I have to say, that is not a certainty. There is a risk to the budget from that. But the biggest figure, the biggest changes in here, and the report does mention it, but it doesn't over-egg it, is that in 23-24, the smart money is on a business rates reset. So if you were to look at page 7, as I'm sure members have done, the rates retention funding, which is about, I don't know, a third of the way down, we're predicting next year to get £5.1 million of retained business rates, which we can use in our budget ourselves. Now, a business rates reset, that's because we've had growth, we've had good business rates growth around the area, and we're allowed to keep some of the growth, as I'm sure you've understood how the scheme works. However, at some point, authorities that have had good growth will need to concede even that growth to businesses, to areas that have not had such good growth. And unfortunately, it rather looks as though Mid-Sussex and other similar authorities will be in a position where they have to give up some of that growth. And you'll see the figure goes down to 3.4 million from 5.1 million. Now, these aren't my figures, these are consultants' figures, 2 sets of consultants' figures. And again, it's by no means a certainty that this will happen, but this is what is being predicted, that money will flow from areas with good growth and good prospects for growth, of course, as well, to those areas that aren't doing so well. And that's only, I suppose that's only fair if you look at the nation as a whole, but it doesn't help us out. So, if we are predicting some £545,000 worth of use of use of general reserve next year. That will come down by £350,000 if and when car parking gets approved. So that's some £200,000 only to be used from business rate from the general reserve. But the following year, it's still going to be £1.4 million. And I suppose, I think we had the luxury, if you like, next year, 22-23, of having some reasonable certainty about our financial position and where we can spend money and how we can invest in services. As it stands right now, that is not a luxury that's afforded to us in years 2, 3, and 4. And one of the key tasks for next year is to think about how we wish to get those income and expenditure figures back in balance again. Quite a key task to get us back in balance for the next, for the next decade, really. Not going to be that easy, some tough decisions to make, but I think we can allow ourselves a bit of breathing space, as Catherine said earlier, to let the pandemic run its course and let things settle back down again. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but these things are not often simple yes/no answers.
No, thank you, Peter. Thank you.
So may I ask a follow-up on that, please, Chairman?
You may do, yes, please.
Thank you very much. So if I've understood you correctly then, we need to use reserves because of the pandemic and so forth. We're going to be hit by the rates retention scheme moving south, as it were, from our perspective. And this is the use of reserves would be if we continued on our current trajectory, but that during the year we will work on how it is that we needn't in subsequent years actually have such high usage of that reserve, because of course eventually it would run out. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yeah.
That's a nice question I can answer yes to.
Thank you.
That's a sort of answer. Thank you. And as we moved on to rates retention on pages 8 and 9, any members, any questions relating to those items? Councillor Gibson. Thank
you, Chairman. I think you seem to have skipped 7 because the finance director went into it. But I do have a question. I think it's a simple question. It might just be my misunderstanding. We've got contribution to job evaluation reserve. And I just wanted to query that Cabinet on the 24th of November recommended that £500,000 be transferred to that specific reserve. And my recollection is that Council thought it was a good idea. I don't see it represented in the figures.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes, of course, Chairman, that was a transfer from the 21-22 revenue budget, effectively, between basically a movement between reserves from general reserve into a specific reserve, the job evaluation reserve. So has happened in this financial year. This refers to, of course, next financial year.
If I can, Chairman, it was just that we've got 392 in the line. That was what was offending me.
Yes, I mean, Chairman, if I may take that up, that the 392 was what was the original budget to move into that reserve. We've now moved an additional £500,000 into that reserve as well from the general reserve as set out within the Cabinet report. Of course, the idea of the job evaluation reserve, if members hadn't quite picked this up, was that because we need to implement job evaluation to make sure that our salary structure is fair and equitable, and the modelling we've done shows that may lead to an increase in costs. Job evaluation, I'm afraid, rarely leads to a decrease in costs, but an increase in costs is what is predicted. So we've made allowance for that. We've been prudent in making allowances for that increase. And if it's not all needed, of course, it will come back out of that specific reserve, back into general reserve, as we would usually do.
You okay, Councillor Gibson, with that response? Good, thank you. Councillor Lynn Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 8, looking at the notes on the medium financial plan, under year 2, it talks about the return of the full leisure contract payments. What I haven't been able to see in the figures is what we're actually paying, what we're expecting to pay out for this current year, and what we would be, how the calculations are working to see what we should be getting in. I'm sure they're in there somewhere, but I couldn't isolate them. sufficiently to understand what the projection is for our leisure centres. Now, perhaps Peter can help me with that.
Peter, are you able to assist?
Yes, I think from memory, Chairman, I think we're forecasting an income of £1 million, I think, in 22-23, and then £1.4 million in 23-24. So we're still predicting a tail on the end of COVID for the next financial year, some reduction in income. But then the full contract payment comes to us in 23-24.
Can you just, where are those figures actually specified, Peter? Can you, where do they, which bit do they fall under?
They would be, Chairman, they would be within the Deputy Assistant Chief Executive's budget in the start there. But of course, you won't always see every line for every budget, but those are the figures we've used.
I appreciate that. Yes, thank you very much.
Councillor Gibson, your hand's still up, or was that previous? Okay, thank you. Moving along, we should cover anybody got any questions on the pressures arising from service review and enhancement or planning? Is your hand up, Councillor Stockwell again, or was it? Can't hear. Okay, no questions. And then moving to page 15, a summary of revenue spending. Do I have any questions?
Sorry, Chairman, I thought you were going to let me ask a question.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying your hand was up.
No.
God, please.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you. It was on page 10 on the pressures regarding the local land charges fees. Now, according to this, those searches have now migrated to the land registry. But I understand we were making reasonable income on that because of the amount of house sales, etc., going on through the county, and plus the fact that we've been particularly good at it. So we've been getting in new business from elsewhere. So that's a bit of a disappointment that we haven't got that. And I assume that we also that will also reduce the amount of staff time that's spent within that particular department within the council. So, you know, is there a saving in terms of staff numbers in that particular department?
Tom, is that one for you?
Yes, Chairman. In truth, it's not a win for us, Councillor Stockwell. It's a statutory requirement that we have to pass the basic searches to the land registry. They collect the fees, but we're still responsible for the register. So there will be a small reduction in staffing, but not that much because we've still got those duties. We do still do the specialist part of the work, the Con 29, but we are likely to hit income. But you're right, income has been very high this year and was very high last year, given the amount of housing transactions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I see no more indications. So we're going to move on to section 2 now, which is the individual business unit service plans, starting on page 16. And the first one is also on 18, housing, planning policy, development management and commercial services. I believe, Catherine, you're going to introduce this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and apologies from Judy Holmes, who's not able to be here with us tonight, normally would be, of course. So on her behalf, I hope the commentary gives you an overview of the main services in this area and the challenges that it's been facing, what it's achieved and what the plan is for next year. I think if Judy were here, she would want to highlight for you the considerable pleasure that we've been able to acquire 23 units of TA for those in the most acute housing need. I think the performance there has been very good, again, in the context of the pandemic and the difficulties that presents. And our ambition will be to continue to acquire TA as it becomes affordable or available, given the huge benefits to very vulnerable people in our communities. So I think she would wish me to draw your attention to that and the continued pressure in the housing team. You know that we have been able to attract some additional funding from the government during the year to help us with some additional staffing resources in the housing team, but we are still seeing a very high level of client demand in that area. And so we continue to work as hard as we can to support them. And I don't see that changing over the 22-23 year. I think the scale of the work in the growth area, which is highlighted in the middle of page 19, is worth pausing on in terms of the level of infrastructure that we're actually seeing on the ground. And I often drive around these sites, as I'm sure many of you do, to see how, and we can see these things progressing. And I think I would draw your attention in particular, again, with the housing theme close to my own heart, that as the new housing starts to come at the eastern end of the arc, that we've negotiated that and secured a 50% affordable housing provision, which is a very significant thing to have been able to achieve. And that we'll start to see that really having an impact in the 22-23 year. And then I think, as I said, so I won't repeat it in my introduction, but I think work on the Centre for Outdoor Sports, which is also highlighted in the commentary, is also worthy of a mention. Chairman, I'll try to answer questions if anybody's got any, and Peter and other colleagues will help me if I'm not able to.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll cover up pages 18 to 24 on block. So if anybody's got any questions relating to individual budgets there or comments, please raise your hand. Councillor Janice Henwood, please. If you just refer what page you're referring to or any particular budget.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's page 23, and I did pose this question previously. I don't quite know where on the budget we're talking about allocations of money to replace the grey and blue bins. It's anticipated it would cost 116,000 a year to replace them. I'm just trying to look on that budget where that money has been allocated for 22-23 on this budget. Thank you, Chairman.
It's shown on page 23, isn't it? So.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's actually a capital budget, so that'll be in the pages towards the back there.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you very much. I don't see any more indications. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to
Chairman.
Councillor Hicks. I haven't seen your hand raised, but that's okay.
Yes, I'm pleased to see the investments associated with the Centre for Sport Excellence and in terms of continued investment in parks, but I'd have some specific questions around housing services. I note on the lack of mention of the social housing register. Whilst I appreciate that is devolved to Clarion Housing Association, I think although much of the emphasis has been on homelessness, I think that we need to remember that the thousands of people on the social housing register in terms of waiting for social housing and to be monitoring that. So I'm disappointed it's not on the service delivery plan as an indicator, which I think we given our statutory responsibility to provide it, I think that's an omission. I also note in terms of the number of empty properties where we have in the past taken some action in terms of reducing, in terms of combating the issue. And it would be useful to have that as an indicator, not as a KPI, but as an indicator that we are able to monitor. If we're in terms of the contracted services, I should also highlight around fly tipping. that I'm concerned that we put more resource into targeting fly tipping. I'm just slightly concerned the projected outcome for the current fiscal year is 220 reports, where the information I was given for the first 6 months of this year was 500 odd. So there seems to be a discrepancy there. But I think now that we have some staff trained, we need to be prioritising this area. In terms of the bin delivery, the bin costs, maybe perhaps we're looking at, I presume, under capital expenditure. So I'll leave that.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Hickson. Noted. Thank you. I see no other indications.
Can I ask that I get a response on some of those questions, please? In due course, maybe from when the I have put some of those to Judy, but I would hope. And in terms of social housing, I think that is an area that perhaps we should be giving more priority in terms of not just the homelessness.
Okay, I don't think that's this meeting tonight, but thank you for your comments, and we'll get feedback for you on that. Councillor Alison Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to ask this question in relation to page 19 on planning policy and economic development, and I hope it's the right juncture in the meeting to ask it. What is the current thinking on introducing the community infrastructure levy? This is a question we've asked a year or two ago, and we were told that we were waiting for changes in legislation before we'd progress on that. And the thing that prompted me to think about this was the note later on in the capital reports about the bin replacement and how there's no Section 106 money available for the bins. And then that made me remember about SIL and that we're still not collecting it. And I haven't seen anything for 18 months on why we're not collecting it and what our plans are. So what is that thinking? And is that, given the large scale financial position of the council, drawing on reserves and so forth, isn't that something we should be looking at to try and shore up our financial position?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Senator Blomfield, would you like to take that one, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. The position on the community infrastructure levy is still uncertain. People will recall that there has been a lot of debate set out in the planning white paper over the future of planning gain. And we were supposed to be getting some more clarity over that, but we're still waiting for the revision to the planning white paper following everybody's responses. So in view of the fact that there is no certainty over the planning infrastructure levy, I think that we as an authority can't embark on looking at setting a community infrastructure levy at this stage, recognising we still do collect Section 106 monies from all developments in line with our Section 106 SPD. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Could I come back, please?
Please, yeah.
Thank you. So on that basis, if we're not progressing with investigating SIL, setting up SIL, because we're waiting for legislation, on that logic, shouldn't we also not be trying to progress with reviewing the district plan at the same time? Because there's also legislation that's going to change relating to that.
Sally, do you want to?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to take that. We are actually being strongly encouraged by government not to stop plan making. So I'm afraid we do have to continue with our plan making, and the current legislation that we have that is in place regarding up-to-date plans is still there. So we very much do need to progress, and we do need to ensure that we have an up-to-date plan.
Councillor Gibson.
May not be part of this meeting, Chairman, but I just heard the business unit leader say that we collect SIL for all developments. I believe that there's a threshold of 9 before we collect S106. Is there a threshold of 9?
Sally?
We collect section 106 in line with the guidance set out in our supplementary planning document, as Councillor Gibson knows. And yes, there is a threshold.
Do you want an answer on what the actual threshold is? I'm not suggesting you get that tonight, Councillor Gibson, but okay, fine. Okay. All right, I see no more indications. So moving on to
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Hicks.
For some reason I'm not seeing your hand go up. Councillor Hicks. Sorry, my apologies, but I don't see the hand on the screen. And you're on mute. You're on. No.
Sorry, Chairman. I'll just highlight in terms of economic development, and although again it may not be a KPI in terms of the council does not have direct control, I do think we need to be monitoring the economic health of the district and our town centres. And although I know estates have monitored the footfall in the orchards, there is a significant gap here in that we're effectively flying blind on economic development in terms of what the level in terms of economic development is in the district, and particularly the health of our town centres. And I'm looking forward to the review of parking in terms of that's promised for the summer around differential pricing, because I think there will be a significant difference between some of our town centres. But it is perhaps an issue that deserves a specific outcome in terms of how we can look at this area and obtain more cross-district information.
Sally, would you like to take that in terms of the economic development across the towns? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if members are aware, but we're currently delivering government funding through the Welcome Back Fund, which is to support increasing footfall back into our town and village centres. And as part of that, we do actually monitor all footfall. So we look at footfall on a monthly basis, and we have a company called Visitor Insights to help us collate that data. So that's for the 3 town centres and the 5 largest villages. In addition to that, as part of the evidence base for the district plan update, we have commissioned a consultant company to look at health check work. And so that's looked at the health check data, again, for the 3 town centres and the largest village centres. So we have that data. Yeah, we agree it's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you. Councillor Trumbull.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just seek clarification? Is this a scrutiny committee on the budget, Chairman, or is this a general scrutiny committee? Thank you.
I get where you're coming from. I'm thinking about that, but I'm trying to give people a fair leeway. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Trumbull. We will try and stick to the budget, but we will move on now to page 25, revenues and benefits. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, not a great deal to say within this section. As you'll appreciate, Revs and Bens have been very busy in distributing grants. As Catherine said, we see that position carrying on for the foreseeable future. And if it's not actually grants they're distributing, it's business rates reliefs, which can get a bit burdensome, although we do get new burdens funding for that. In finance, the headline really is around the introduction of a new cash management system, and which should bring some more flexibilities with it so that people can make payments to us at a time and place that suits them. We haven't done that before. In community services, the focus there is on rebuilding the communities, particularly around actually getting the wellbeing service, which is actually very well regarded both by members I know and by the county council, getting the wellbeing service back up and running again in a face-to-face way, and trying to improve the health of our communities. And I suppose one part that draws the eye is around corporate estates and facilities and the range of projects that are underway there. And as it mentions, trying to come up with a viable and sustainable proposal to redevelop part of the Orchard Shopping Centre, Burgess Hill Station, which I think members agree were desperately in need of some renovation alongside Network Rail, as well as trying to progress the Burgess Hill Town Centre proposals with our partners New River. And finally, as a final paragraph mentions, taking forward a business case for, and feasibility work on the redevelopment and regeneration of Clare Hall site, which I think would find favour with many members. A couple of other points quickly. Page 28, there was a question about that £78,000 figure on page 78. That is the cost of staffing. That includes the staffing budget and some spend. Of course, on top of that, there's still, I think, the £100,000 in the sustainability reserve. And the final thing I should say is I need to make a correction to something I said earlier. I said that next year we were forecasting income of £1 million from the leisure budget, and then from the leisure provider, and then a further 1.4, no, it's not further, a £1.4 million in 23-24. The figures are actually £600,000 in 22-23, and then 1.4. So the figure that's changing is, I said 1 million, it should be £600,000 in next year from our leisure provider. So I'm sorry about that error, Chairman.
Thank you for clarifying that. Pages 25 to 30 on this section. I see Councillor Whittaker indicating. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to. Lots have been mentioned about the parks investment, and that's excellent. £1.6 million. That's an awful lot of money. For the last 2 years, I've been trying to lobby very hard for our sports clubs and sports development programme. And in the last sort of year and a half, the council has approved the review of that. So I see a lot of investment into parks, but notwithstanding the Burgess Hill new sports complex, which I think is funded from S106, I don't see much investment, as Councillor Gibson touched on, as an example, Crawley Down Haven Centre, improvement to existing football pitches, playing surfaces, drainage, pavilion facilities. Now, you know, sports facilities, you know, we've got a sports council in East Grinstead, we've got one in Burgess Hill. Sports councils engage schools, engage all the clubs, all ages, from 5-year-olds right the way through to, you know, 90-year-olds. So I know we've got our cabinet members listening here, so it's just a plea really for any possible future funding to be diverted into existing sports facilities to upgrade them, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Your point's noted. Thank you. I see no other indications on that section. Thank you. Moving on to page 31. Someone who's going to introduce this: customer services and communications, digital and technology services, human resources and payroll. Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So on page 31, customer services, the main work that we'll be doing this coming year is to really look at the rich information we get from customers. So why they contact us, the different channels they use, so not just the phone, it includes the internet and through social media, and then use that to improve the way in which we provide services and significantly reduce the number of contacts they need to have with us because something's gone wrong or not in the way they'd like. And early work that we've completed this year, so we've done some deep dive analysis into why people have been contacted us, have already improved a range of our services and reduced the number of people ringing because they're not getting what they need. So that will be a considerable part of the work, and that will be supported by people across the whole organisation, because customer services are part of a broader team within all of the services that respond to customers, whether it's someone working through a process or someone talking to a particular resident. And that then links to the work of the communications team. As Peter has said, a lot of communications recently to ensure we reach the right people who need grants and increase the uptake of that. So the communications team are working across the council again and looking at how we reach who we need to reach for our key messages from the council, how people access services, what we can do for them and what's happening. If we move on then to page 32, digital and technology. As Councillor Lee has said earlier, people are working differently now after COVID. Some people are working more from home, flexible working, hybrid working. And so what the team have done is increased our capacity to enable that both with our staff, but also to enable that so that we can respond to customers from wherever we are. That means we've had to improve the infrastructure in a number of ways. And there are two key projects here. One is about cybersecurity. I won't bore you with the details, but just to give you a brief taste of what we're seeing. A week before Christmas, there were 56 attempted attacks on the council systems, particularly on planning and revs and bends, because they're systems people can log into to get services, of which 54 of those were from servers in Russia. So we're not alone in that, just to reassure you, we're not the sole people getting that. That's across all public services, including health. So what we have to do is ensure the cybersecurity of our systems, because if you can imagine any of those go down, a lot of our staff won't be able to do their work, and a lot of our residents won't be able to receive the services that they want and need. Within that, we're also looking at the website redesign. So using the information we've gained through customer interactions over COVID, we'll be redesigning our website so it's easier to use. People are able to find the information they need more quickly. And we're doing that work jointly with other councils across the country. And we're using software that will significantly reduce the costs of updating our web presence. The other bit we're doing is we're working with government on line of business systems, so systems that we've had for some time where the market hasn't developed and are causing us and our residents problems. And we are working through those in order to find better solutions for them. We're not the only council in that position. There are a number around the country. What we're seeing is a, if you like, a revolution in the market for public sector provision of services, where new entrants are coming in with new products, untested, need improving, and the old people in the market that used to provide that are moving away and therefore not supporting their existing products as much as they would, and that's a problem for us. Then moving on, as both the leader and chief executive has said, we will be completing our first fibre projects, and within that, what we are doing is also enabling our Dig Once program. So where roads are dug up, duct is going in for free, which is great. So that's above and beyond the 100 kilometres of fibre that we intend to use. And also, as of last week, we've agreed with our partners something called PIA, which is a means to allow us to use duct and other assets from Openreach in order to pull fibre through, again, to increase, and it makes it much easier for the market then to connect up other communities, and roads don't need to be dug up, so it's more sustainable. So we're proceeding with that as well. And we'll also be negotiating with a number of providers of connectivity, both to residents and to businesses. And we've been approached by, I think it's fair to say, a fair few who are currently, we've given them details of our fibre, where it is, how many premises it passes, all the data and technical information, and they're now looking through that, and they'll be getting their money in order to connect up further homes shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for your report. Thank you very much. Questions relating to pages 31 to 33. Councillor Hicks.
Yes, Chairman. Firstly, I'd remind the committee that we are talking about the draft corporate plan and budget, not the budget itself, and therefore we're looking as much at the service priorities for each individual business area. I'm pleased to hear Simon Hughes in terms of the enhancements he's planning for the forthcoming year in terms of that particular area, and particularly in terms of the integration of digital and telephone customer services and thinking, and I would just highlight that I still think there's a disparity between how the two are treated in terms of service volumes, where we're not, as part of the business unit plan, directly monitoring. I'm sure we do, but it would be useful to have the figures available as part of the service plan itself, relating to email and digital form use. I think the fact that just the number of calls are being recorded in the plan itself is perhaps systematic, that we need to attach more priority to those areas, which, from what Simon was saying, I understand we are, but I think we need to be careful we're not behind the curve on those issues.
Something I think to bring before for the next KPI meeting of this committee, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Trumbull.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps something a little more strategic. Simon made the interesting point that the pattern of working has changed dramatically over the course of the pandemic. And I guess that's gone hand in hand with developments in digital and technology. I'd be interested to know the current utilisation of Oaklands, the percentage of our staff who are working there, and the percentage of our staff who are working at home on a more or less permanent basis. And I'd also be interested to know whether it's envisaged that that split will continue. And then, depending on what that split is, I'd be interested to know what the future thinking is on the provision or use of Oaklands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trumbull. I don't believe it's an either or. I believe it's flexible working. But Catherine, would you like to comment, please?
Certainly, Chairman. Yes, we've continued an agile working policy all through the pandemic, which means that the needs of the business drive how the staff work. But you also know that the vast majority of the staff can work remotely, and that has been a wise decision, because that's enabled our staff resilience to be optimal. And you'll appreciate as the case numbers of the pandemic have gone up and down, a lot of our teams are very small, and an outbreak in even a small group of people, 2 or 3, could mean one of our services may actually not be able to provide the service. So in order to protect resilience, we have kept staff in the safest place, which has been their homes to a greater or lesser extent. But the Chairman is quite right. Staff do still come into Oaklands fairly regularly, depending on their job roles. And what we've also had to do is in Oaklands, because you may remember before the pandemic, it was pretty full. People were pretty tightly packed in Oaklands. And one of the advantages of the new agile working is that we can space people out, thus making the environment COVID secure and safe for staff when they do work in the offices. And I don't envisage that policy changing anytime soon. It's proved its worth in terms of our ability to protect the resilience of our services over the last 2 years. And also staff have valued that way of working. So I don't intend to change that anytime soon. As to the future uses of Oaklands, this gets alluded to quite often, whether this is an asset we, I guess, need to continue to keep in its current form. And that's certainly something we can consider in the medium to long term. Right now, we need extra space in order to ensure that the offices are COVID secure and people are spaced out and the cleansing regime as it should be. But going forward, it's an asset that we own, and we can consider that in the fullness of time. Does that answer the question?
I believe it does. Councillor Trumbull, you're okay with that? Yeah, good. Seeing people nodding. Thank you. I see no more indications on this section. Moving on to page 34, legal services, democratic services, local land charges, environmental health and building control. Mr. Clark, Tom, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Starting with legal services, you'll see there's a pressure there for an upgrade ICANN system. The ICANN system we use to hold our files electronically. The present system does not work terribly well from a home location. The new system we're looking at is a cloud system and should work a lot better, should enable officers to be more efficient with their work. On land charges, Councillor Stockwell has already alluded to this. The main salary reduction is actually to do with the data becoming computerized, but you'll see there are two minor reductions in salary costs as a result of the land registry picking up the LLC searches. Democratic services, it's a standard budget, but you'll note from the commentary that they are going to be rather busy with the implementing the Boundary Commission recommendations, and also there's two currently governance reviews to complete, and we expect to have more required as a result of the changes that the Boundary Commission are suggesting. On environmental health, the team are very much looking forward to getting back to business as usual, hopefully from April onwards. They have had additional funds, but it has been a huge amount of work over the last 2 years, advising businesses as the COVID restrictions have changed over that period. And finally, building control, they have worked throughout the pandemic, as has the building trade, held back a bit by the availability of materials and the cost of those materials, but hopefully the supply chains will improve in 22-23. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for your report. Do I see any indications for this section? I do not. Thank you very much. So we're going to be moving on to section 3 on page 40, the capital programme. Mr. Stewart, Peter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, not a great deal to say. A modest capital programme. The justification details are all in pages 43 onwards. And just to refer back to something that was asked earlier, page 45 gives you the capital programme, capital projects, as I say, really for the replacement wheelie bins. But a range of projects here. Some internal regarding Oaklands, and some remodelling of the way we use the offices, some car park resurfacing, and then of course some bigger projects relating to parks improvements. Thank you.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chairman. In previous years, the last couple of years, you've had various lines for capital receipts, Mr. Stewart, and obviously the biggest capital receipt was the disposal of Hurst Farm. But I don't see any residual value for that large capital receipt in these figures. Did it go into some other account area that I'm not aware of? Please, can you just clarify that? Thank you.
Well, Chairman, there should be no areas within the council's finances that you members are not aware of course, because it would have gone into the capital receipts reserve and used to finance the orchards. Mostly 20 million of it was used to finance the orchards, and 4 million was held back to finance principally temporary accommodation. We don't tend to, unless we know the receipts coming in, definitely, we tend not to try and forecast forward and use capital receipts until we actually have them. Members prior to this council have been caught out, and in other councils, where spending plans have been made on the or based on the timing of receipts coming in, and then, as members will appreciate, it is very hard to draw back from those spending plans if the receipt does not come in, because the public still want their facilities and improvements and what have you, and you're then left trying to finance capital expenditure where you were expecting a receipt that has not arrived. So we're not predicting any receipts in next year. We do have some disposals in gestation, but we'll account for those as we go along, and that's for prudency's sake. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at the numbers again, and at the park improvement programme, there's a couple of areas there, Victoria Park, Havers Heath and St John's Park in Burgess Hill, where you've got no figures. Now, it says the products are justified, so it's within the plan, but we've got no figures in there whatsoever. So the costs of those, we've got them in for the forecast for 22-23 and going forward up to 24-25, with no figures in there, must throw the budget out. How are we going to cope with that, please?
Mr. Stewart, would you like to comment on that, please?
I will. The short answer, as Chairman, is that they are not approved for expenditure yet until those figures come forward. I mean, in essence, as you'd appreciate, and in line with many things that we do, demand for service improvement usually outstrips the money we have available to make that improvement. And in those particular examples, the projects need refining before they come back for members for approval. But we are committed to doing those things, simply like value engineering to ensure that the income matches the expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Whitaker. Oh.
Sorry, Chairman. I didn't want to come in before any other members, so I'm happy to come in at the end. It's a follow-up from Mr. Stewart's reply before. On page 40, paragraph 4E, it mentions about the assets and the asset register and asset management plan. Can I ask if the asset management register is up to date, and has it been revalued, and are all the revaluations up to date, please? Thank you.
Is that one for you, Peter, or is that one for Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. It is for me. I mean, yes, it is. It is. I mean, if I was to, there are names that members will be familiar with in terms of our sales, and those are the ones that have been to cabinet in the last probably 18 months. It's not, we've as you members appreciate, we've sold we have sold at least 2 assets, one through auction. We've tried to get bids on another one in East Grinstead Way. We have sold the site opposite the council offices on Paddock Hall Road. But sale of sites where you want to control what is happening on that site, a sale of that site is not always a straightforward matter, and sometimes it's taking longer than we anticipated to sell those assets off. There are no further assets other than the ones that have been to cabinet, which members will be aware of, that we have in line for a sale right now. So hence there are no capital receipts that we are predicting in the next year or two to come forward, other than those that have been mentioned already to cabinet. But the asset management plan, yes, asset plan is up to date. We need to review that again in line with our usual processes to keep looking for areas that are surplus to requirements. But I don't anticipate anything large coming forward.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Hicks, I've realised why I don't see your hand going. It's the same colour as your wall at the back. Everybody else is yellow and yours is pink. But anyway, Councillor Hicks.
Sorry, Chairman, I'll make sure I change it for next time.
I don't know if you have any control over it.
Just in terms of prioritising capital programmes, I wonder around sustainability issues, whether we formally assess the sustainability impact of each project and the possible positive benefits, thinking not just of central heating upgrades, but the parks and leisure, whatever, in terms of how sustainability can be built into our capital projects. So I wonder what account has been taken of those issues, and in particular, I'd just ask about the bin replacement, whether in terms of there's any requirements from government legislation, for example, if we had to, if we were no longer able to combine all the recycling together, so it might mean a total restructure in terms of how we collect recycling. So I wonder if that's been taken into account. And just on the biggest investment around Hemley's Meadow in terms of the playing field park there. I'd appreciate just a little detail in terms of why, in terms of the amount of money that we're being asked to invest, given that we've had that on most of the other items, but it doesn't seem to be any specific detail in terms of the size of the investment. Thank you.
In terms of sustainability, I'm on that committee. As far as I'm aware, we've not actually landed any definite detail yet, Councillor. It's a bit like saying, you go into a restaurant, being handed the bill before you've even seen the menu. Any other? Sorry.
If I may come back on that, Chairman, we did agree a sustainability appraisal in terms of major items coming to the council in terms of reports. So I wouldn't see that as I would see an adjacent to that in terms of some review around capital expenditure, certainly some assessment. But I wonder if the two other points could be answered.
My apologies. Catherine was comment on your sustainability again.
Yeah, I was just going to say what you pretty much said, Councillor Hicks. That's a very good point about the capital justifications. We'll take that away. So thank you for suggesting that around sustainability and how we just ensuring. I'm pretty sure we do, but I'd like to just recheck that. So thanks for that point. On the two detailed points about waste collection services, we have got Rob Anderson here. Can I suggest that he helps you with those 2 points? If that's all right, Chairman.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So in respect of the bins, and yes, of course, we've got some government legislation that's currently being finalised following recent consultations. And one of the things that is being considered is around the requirement to separately collect some aspects of dry recycling. That would only be on the basis of an assessment to identify whether it was actually technically, environmentally, economically viable to do so. And so there'd be an exercise that we'd need to go through to demonstrate that the process that we currently use to collect our recycling is all of those things, is sustainable, is the economic, is the most environmentally effective way of collecting our recycling. And we're confident, based on the way in which our recycling is collected and processed, that we'll be able to demonstrate that. However, what I would say is that the Wheelie Bin Capital Programme is a phased programme over the course of 15 years and is about replacement of end-of-life bins. So it's something that we need to do, and we will certainly not be investing in a wholesale replacement of all our bin stock over the next couple of years. It's a phased programme over a long period of time. So should anything change over time, we'll be able to recalibrate our approach going forward. On the question around Hemsley's Meadow, what I would say on that is that it is a project that is estimated to cost in the region of £900,000, of which nearly 700,000 is Section 106 that's been specifically collected for the purposes of refurbishing and enhancing that site as a consequence of some of the significant developments that have taken place in the Peace Pottage area. The proposals at this stage are outlined, but are based on detailed public consultation and include all the things you would expect of a significant parks improvement programme, sports pitch improvements, new play areas, general improvements to the public realm, just to sort of reflect the importance of that park in providing a usable and modern open space to service all those new houses that have come into Peace Pottage over the last few years.
Okay, I see no more indications. So I'm going to move you to now the recommendations on page 7. I'll take them one by one because I think they're quite important, very important. So again, use the yes, no button. So recommendation is the council is asked to consider proposals for 2022-23 set out in the appended report and agree any comments or recommendations that it wishes to take to cabinet on. So first of all, that on item A, the financial outlook facing the council over the medium term. Agree with that or not? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 2, the proposed increase in council tax. Okay, we have 14 in favour, 1 against. Passed. Item C, the strategy to use general reserve to balance the budget over the medium term. Okay, so a couple haven't voted. I don't know whether they're abstentions. We'll wait a couple of seconds, few seconds. Okay, so that's 13 in favour, 1 against, 1 abstention. And we'll take D and E together, the proposed capital programme and the service commentaries and supporting summary budgets for each business unit. Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah. Councillor Brunson, you've got your hand up. I would assume that's a yes, but could you confirm that?
Sorry, I keep losing signal and I can't keep up as what's being asked because it keeps going into like garbled. So I think I'm just going to have to.
Okay, well, the recommendation is you can say yes or no to this. Is the proposed capital programme and service commentaries and supporting summary budgets for each business unit to agree to that?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, thank you. That's 14 in favour and 1 abstention. Thank you very much for that and that robust debate on that. Moving on to item 8, scrutiny for leader and finance and performance work programme for, I think I should say 2022-23. Is that correct? On page 8. Tom. Sorry, page 11. Tom, are you there? I think on mute. You can now, yes. You're on mute.
Is Tom supposed to be speaking, in which case he's on mute?
We're just trying to sort it for Tom here. He's some technical problem getting up unmuting. I'll carry on without Tom. And basically, we got the work program for the coming year for 2022-23. I think that's a typo, isn't it? In purpose of report, should say 22-20. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So it's my mistake. I'm reading correct. So that's the work program for laid out in front. Is that agreed? Please raise your hands.
Apologies, Chairman, I'm back.
Oh, he's back. Did you want to say a few words, Tom?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, please indicate. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2 due to notice which has been given. I have none. Therefore, thank you very much, everybody, very much. You remain seated. I close the meeting at 19:38.
My apologies for being late, Chairman, but unfortunately it was down to my computer.
Okay.